That Saturday, I almost didn't go. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 10 minutes, engine running, heat blasting against the October chill, trying to convince myself to just drive home. The restaurant glowed through the windshield, all warm light and couples moving past the windows, and I watched them like they were a different species. People who knew how to do this. People who wanted to be here. I thought about the duplex waiting for me, the hum of the fridge, the silence that would wrap around me the second I walked in. Familiar, safe, empty. I turned off the engine. The place was called Lucia's, one of those Italian restaurants that tries a little too hard. Checkered tablecloths, fake candles flickering on every table, a hostess with a smile so bright it hurt to look at. The air smelled like garlic bread and expensive wine, and soft music played from speakers I couldn't see. I gave Derek's name at the front, and the hostess nodded, leading me through a maze of tables toward the back. My palms were sweating. I wiped them on my jeans and told myself this was stupid, that I'd done this before, that it was just dinner with a stranger, and in 2 hours I'd be back on my couch pretending it never happened. Then I saw her. She was sitting alone at a table near the window, hands folded around a glass of water she hadn't touched. Dark hair fell past her shoulders, tucked behind one ear. She wore a green sweater the color of pine needles. Simple, no jewelry except for a thin silver ring on her thumb. Pretty, but not in the way that demands attention. Quiet, like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. When she looked up and saw me approaching, something flickered across her face. Not hope, more like bracing, like she was getting ready for impact. I stopped at the edge of the table. "Ellie?" She nodded. And then she did something I wasn't expecting. She reached across the table and slid a small notebook toward me, leather-bound, worn soft at the corners, the pages slightly yellowed from use. I looked at it, then at her, confused. She tapped the cover with one finger, a gesture that said, "Open it." I did. The first page was covered in neat, small handwriting. Blue ink, each letter careful, deliberate. "Hi, I'm Ellie. I can't speak. Derek said he told you. Did he?" I read it twice. Then I looked up at her, and the pieces started falling into place. The way she watched my face, the tension in her shoulders, the glass of water she'd been gripping like a lifeline. Derek hadn't told me anything. Not a single word. He'd set me up on a blind date with a woman who couldn't speak, and he'd let me walk in completely unprepared, probably thinking it was funny, probably thinking I'd bail. For a second, I wanted to. I'm not proud of that, but it's true. My first instinct was to make an excuse. Bathroom, phone call, anything, and slip out the back before the bread arrived. She was watching me, and I could see it in her eyes. She knew. She was waiting for me to leave. She'd done this before, sat at tables just like this one, slid her notebook across to strangers who read those words, and suddenly remembered somewhere else they needed to be. The way she held herself, still, careful, like any sudden movement might spook me, told me everything about how many times she'd been disappointed. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. Something shifted in her face. Not quite relief, but close. She picked up a pen from beside her plate. She'd come prepared, I realized, probably always did, and wrote quickly beneath her first message. "Most people leave before the bread arrives." I read it, then reached for the pen. She hesitated for just a second before handing it over, and I turned to a fresh page. "He didn't tell me, but I'm already here. Might as well see if the pasta's any good." She read it again, and then the corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of one, like she was afraid to let it fully form. She took the pen back. "You're either very kind or very hungry." I laughed before I could stop myself. A few people at nearby tables glanced over, but I didn't care. I wrote back, "Little of both, long week." The waiter appeared then, a young guy with a practiced smile who looked between us, noticed the notebook, and paused. His eyes flicked to Ellie, then to me, clearly trying to figure out what was happening. She didn't flinch, didn't try to explain. just pointed at something on the menu, then held up 2 fingers. The waiter nodded slowly, scribbled on his pad, and retreated without asking questions. "Ordered for both of us," she wrote when he was gone. "Hope you like mushroom ravioli." What if I'm allergic to mushrooms? Then this will be a very short date. I grinned. Actually grinned, which surprised me more than anything else. I'd expected this to be awkward. Stilted silences, forced small talk, the kind of painful evening you endure just to say you tried. But sitting across from Ellie, watching her handwriting fill the page, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity. She wasn't what I'd expected, and I couldn't stop wondering what else I'd gotten wrong. The bread came. We stayed. She told me about herself in fragments, one notebook page at a time. 24 years old. Graphic designer, freelance, worked from her apartment most days. Clients communicated through email. Half of them had no idea she couldn't speak. She'd moved to Richmond 3 years ago from a small town in North Carolina, chasing something she couldn't quite name. Independence, maybe? Or just distance from a place that had never known what to do with her. I told her about the HVAC work, about crawling through attics and basements, about the satisfaction of hearing a system kick on after hours of troubleshooting. She listened, really listened, her eyes following my words like she was reading them, even though I was speaking. Out loud. When I mentioned Mrs. Patterson and her nightly Wheel of Fortune routine, Ellie's shoulders shook with silent laughter, and something in my chest loosened at the sight. "You live alone?" I asked. She nodded, then wrote, "Me and a cat named Miso. He ignores everyone equally. Very democratic. Sounds like my kind of cat. You'd hate him, everyone does. I love him anyway." The ravioli arrived, and it was good, better than I'd expected from a place with fake candles. We ate slowly, the notebook passing between us like a conversation with a delay built in. I'd say something. She'd write something. I'd read it and respond. It should have been clunky, frustrating even. Instead, it felt deliberate. Every word she wrote meant something because she had to choose to write it. No filler, no small talk just to fill silence. Just what mattered. Halfway through the meal, she paused, pen hovering over the page. I watched her think, watched the way she chewed her bottom lip when she was choosing her words. Then she wrote, slowly, "Why did you stay?" When you saw the notebook. Most people don't. I set my fork down. The question sat between us, heavier than it should have been. I could have given her an easy answer. Curiosity, politeness, the fact that I was hungry and the parking lot was cold. But she deserved better than easy. She'd spent her whole life getting easy answers from people who didn't mean them. I took the pen. "Because you looked like you expected me not to, and I'm tired of being what people expect." She read it once, twice. Her eyes stayed on the page for a long moment, and when she finally looked up, there was something different in her expression. Not the guarded wariness I'd seen when I first sat down. Something softer, something like the beginning of trust. She didn't write anything back, just nodded, small and careful, like she was filing the words away somewhere safe. We finished dinner. Ordered coffee we didn't need just to have an excuse to stay longer. The restaurant started emptying around us, waiters stacking chairs in the corners, the hostess checking her watch with increasing frequency. I didn't notice until Ellie tapped the table and pointed at the clock on the wall. 10:47 p.m. We'd been there for almost 4 hours. "I should go," she wrote. "Work tomorrow. Client in Seattle thinks 6 a.m. meetings are reasonable." Sounds brutal. It is. But he pays well, so I pretend to be awake. I walked her to her car, a small blue Honda parked at the far end of the lot. The night had gotten colder, our breath visible in the air between us. She stopped at the driver's side door and turned to face me, the notebook still clutched against her chest like armor. For a moment, neither of us moved. The silence felt different out here, not empty but full. Full of all the things we hadn't said, all the pages we hadn't written yet. She opened the notebook and scribbled something quickly, then held it up, Same time next week? I should have hesitated, should have thought about it, weighed the risks, considered all the ways this could go wrong. That's what I usually did. Talked myself out of things before they had a chance to become anything. But standing there in that parking lot, watching her wait for an answer she probably expected to be no, I didn't want to be that person anymore. Yeah, I said. I'd like that. She smiled. A real one this time, not the careful, almost smile from earlier. It changed her whole face, made her look younger, lighter, like someone who just set down something heavy. She got in her car and drove away, and I stood there watching her taillights disappear around the corner. The parking lot was empty now, just me in the cold and the faint sound of someone washing dishes inside the restaurant. I should have felt tired. It was late. I had work in the morning, and I'd just spent 4 hours on what should have been an awkward obligation. Instead, I felt awake. Really awake, in a way I hadn't in months, maybe years. I walked back to my truck, hands in my pockets, breath clouding in front of me. The engine took a few tries to turn over. It always did in cold weather. But when it finally caught, I just sat there for a minute, staring at the empty passenger seat, the notebook, the careful handwriting, the way she'd watched me like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Most people leave before the bread arrives. I thought about all the other dates she must have been on, all the other people who'd read those first words and decided she wasn't worth the effort, all the dinners she'd sat through alone after someone made an excuse and disappeared. I thought about Derek, who'd set this up without telling me, probably expecting me to be one of them. I thought about Ellie, writing same time next week, like she was bracing herself for rejection even while she asked. Something shifted in my chest. Not dramatic, not some movie moment where the music swells and everything changes. Just a small click, like a lock turning, like a system kicking on after being broken for a long time. I put the truck in gear and drove home. The duplex was dark when I got there, except for the blue flicker of Mrs. Patterson's TV through her curtains. Wheel of Fortune was long over, but she'd probably fallen asleep watching something else. The porch light was out. I kept meaning to replace the bulb, so I fumbled with my keys in the dark, finally got the door open and stepped inside. The silence hit me immediately, the same way it always did. But tonight, it felt different. Not quite as heavy. Not quite as permanent. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, kicked off my boots, and stood in the middle of my living room, staring at nothing. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed on the street outside, headlights sweeping briefly across the ceiling. I pulled out my phone and opened the text thread with Derek. For a long moment, I just stared at it, thumbs hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to be angry with him. Part of me was angry at the ambush, the setup, the way he'd thrown me into something without any warning like it was some kind of joke. But another part of me, the part that was still thinking about Ellie's smile and the notebook and the 4 hours that had felt like nothing, that part couldn't quite manage the anger. I typed, "You could have told me." His response came almost immediately, like he'd been waiting. "Would you have gone?" I didn't answer. We both knew he was right. The next morning, I woke up thinking about her. Not in any dramatic way, just her face, her handwriting, the way she'd laughed without making a sound. I made coffee, got dressed, drove to a job in the suburbs where a family's furnace had given up sometime in the night. I crawled around their basement, replaced a blower motor, collected the check, and drove to the next appointment. Normal day. Same as always, but I kept checking my phone. Around noon, I finally gave in and sent her a text. We'd exchanged numbers before she left, her typing hers into my phone since she couldn't just say it out loud. The contact name she'd entered was just Ellie, a mushroom emoji, I assumed because of the ravioli. Hope the Seattle guy wasn't too brutal this morning. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then, he made me sit through a 2-hour call about font choices. I'm considering witness protection. I laughed out loud, startling myself. I was sitting in my truck outside a strip mall, eating a gas station sandwich, and I laughed so hard I almost choked on the bread. Comic Sans? Worse, Papyrus. That's a war crime. Report him to The Hague. Already drafted the complaint. Need a character witness. The texts kept coming. All afternoon, between jobs, during jobs when I probably should have been paying attention, she wrote the way she talked, or didn't talk, I guess, with a dry humor that caught me off guard every time. She sent me a photo of her cat, a gray tabby sprawled across her keyboard like he owned it. I sent her a picture of the dust-covered attic I was crawling through. She responded with a single word: glamorous. By the time I got home that night, my phone's battery was at 8%, and I couldn't stop smiling. We talked every day after that. Not always long conversations, sometimes just a few texts back and forth, observations about our days, complaints about clients and customers, the small things that don't mean much individually but start to add up. She told me about the logo she was designing for a coffee shop in Portland. I told her about the woman who'd accused me of breaking her AC when I'd actually fixed it. She sent me sketches she'd done of Miso in various poses, sleeping, judging, plotting world domination. I sent her photos of particularly impressive duct tape repairs I'd found in people's homes. Saturday came faster than I expected. We met at a coffee shop this time, a quieter place without the fake candles and checkered tablecloths. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with the notebook open, pen in hand. She looked up when I walked in, and this time the smile came easier, less guarded. "Brought you something," she wrote when I sat down, then slid a small piece of paper across the table. It was a sketch of me. Quick, simple, done in black ink, but unmistakably me, sitting in my truck, phone in hand, surrounded by swirls that I realized were meant to be insulation dust. At the bottom she'd written, "The HVAC hero contemplates his next mission." I stared at it for longer than I should have. Something about seeing myself through her eyes, captured in a few lines on a piece of paper, made my throat tight in a way I couldn't explain. "This is amazing," I said. "You made me look way more heroic than I am." She shrugged, but I could see the pleased flush on her cheeks. Artistic license. That second date lasted even longer than the first. We talked, or wrote, or whatever you want to call it, until the coffee shop closed, then walked to a park nearby and sat on a bench watching the last light fade from the sky. She told me more about her work, about the clients who drove her crazy, and the projects that made it all worth it. I told her about my parents, about the divorce, about Dad in Texas and Mom in Florida, and the way I'd somehow ended up the only one who stayed. "That sounds lonely," she wrote. "I'm used to it." She looked at me for a long moment, then wrote, "Me too. But maybe we don't have to be." The weeks started to blur together in the best way. Coffee shops and parks, and eventually her apartment, a small studio filled with plants and art prints, and the cat who ignored me exactly as promised. She cooked for me once, pasta, because of course, and burned the sauce so badly we had to open every window, despite the cold. I fixed her leaky bathroom faucet and pretended not to notice the way she watched my hands while I worked. We developed routines, rituals, the kind of small things that start to feel essential without you realizing it. I bought a notebook of my own, not because I needed it, I could still talk after all, but because something about writing things down, being deliberate about every word, felt right when I was with her. Sometimes we'd sit on her couch, passing the notebooks back and forth, having conversations in ink and paper while Miso dozed between us. It was slower than talking, more careful, and somehow, because of that, more honest. One night in early November, she wrote something that made me stop. "Can I tell you something? Something I don't tell people?" I nodded, waiting. She took a long time with the next page. I watched her write, pause, cross something out, write again. When she finally slid the notebook to me, her hands were shaking slightly. "I wasn't always like this. I could talk when I was little. Then I got sick. When I was 7. Meningitis. The doctor said my vocal cords were damaged. They tried surgeries, therapies. Nothing worked. I remember what my voice sounded like, and sometimes I dream in it. But when I wake up, it's gone. I read it twice, 3 times. The words felt heavy, physical, like I could feel their weight on the page. Kids at school called me Ghost Girl, she continued on the next page. Teachers talked over me like I wasn't there. My parents tried, but they didn't know what to do. Eventually, I learned to take up less space, to expect less. It was easier than hoping and being disappointed. She wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were fixed on the notebook, on the words she'd written, like she couldn't bear to see my reaction. I picked up my pen. I'm not going anywhere. She read it. And then, for the first time since I'd known her, I saw tears in her eyes. Not falling. She blinked them back before they could. But there, glistening in the lamplight. That's what they all say, she wrote. I'm not them. She looked at me then. Really looked. And whatever she saw must have been enough, because she set the notebook down, leaned across the couch, and kissed me. It was soft, careful, like she was asking a question she was afraid to hear the answer to. I answered. When we finally pulled apart, her forehead rested against mine, her breath warm on my face. Neither of us wrote anything. We didn't need to. Sometimes words, written or spoken, aren't enough. Sometimes you just have to be there, present, holding on. Miso yowled from the kitchen, annoyed at being ignored. We both laughed, mine out loud, hers silent and shaking, and the moment broke, but gently, like setting something fragile down instead of dropping it. I should go, I said eventually. Work tomorrow. She nodded, but her hand stayed on my arm, fingers curled into the fabric of my sleeve. Same time Saturday? Same time Saturday. I drove home that night with the windows down despite the cold, letting the air wake me up, keep me present. The duplex was dark when I got there, Mrs. Patterson's TV silent for once. I let myself in, stood in the middle of my living room, and realized something had changed. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of her, full of notebooks and sketches and silent laughter, full of someone who'd learned to expect nothing and was slowly, carefully, starting to hope, full of something that felt terrifyingly like the beginning. I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know about Derek, about the bet, about all the ways this was going to get harder before it got easier. I just knew that for the first time in years, I wasn't dreading tomorrow. I was looking forward to it. That should have been my first warning, but I was too busy being happy to notice. The weeks that followed felt like borrowed time, though I didn't know it then. November settled over Richmond like a blanket, all brown leaves and gray skies and the kind of cold that makes you grateful for working heat. Ellie and I fell into a rhythm so natural it scared me sometimes. The way she started texting me good morning before I'd even finished my coffee. The way I found myself driving past her apartment on jobs that didn't require it, just to feel closer to her orbit. She came to my place for the first time on a Saturday afternoon, standing in the doorway with Miso's carrier in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. He gets anxious when I'm gone too long, she wrote when I raised an eyebrow at the cat. And I wanted to cook for you. A redemption meal. No burning this time. She didn't burn anything. She made chicken parmesan from scratch while I sat at the kitchen table pretending to help, but mostly just watching her move through my space like she belonged there. Miso explored every corner with suspicious intensity, eventually settling on the arm of my couch like he was claiming territory. Mrs. Patterson knocked halfway through dinner to bring over cookies she'd accidentally made too many of, and I saw her eyes light up when she noticed Ellie at the stove. That one's a keeper, she told me quietly at the door. Don't mess it up. I didn't plan to. Ellie started leaving things at my place. A toothbrush first, then a phone charger, then a sweater she'd worn once and forgotten on the back of a chair. I didn't put them away. I liked seeing them there, small pieces of her scattered through rooms that had been empty too long. Her sketchbook lived on my coffee table. Her favorite tea appeared in my cabinet. The duplex started to smell different. Her shampoo, her lotion, the specific way she made coffee that was somehow better than mine even though we used the same machine. We talked about the hard things, too. Not all at once, but in pieces, the way you share weight when you're learning to trust someone with it. She told me about the surgeries, 3 of them, between ages 8 and 12, each one promising hope that never materialized. She told me about the therapists who treated her like a project, the well-meaning teachers who spoke slowly, like her ears were broken too, the kids who'd throw things at her in the hallway just to see if she'd scream. She couldn't. She wanted to, but the sounds wouldn't come, and eventually she stopped trying. She told me about the first boy she'd ever liked, 16, braces, thought he was different. He'd asked her to a dance, then stood her up because his friends dared him to see how long he could keep the mute girl believing. She'd waited at the gym entrance for 2 hours before walking home alone. I stopped going to dances after that, she wrote. Stopped going to a lot of things. I told her about Kayla, about the way she'd looked at me when she said I was too closed off, like she was disappointed but not surprised, about my dad's phone calls that came less and less often until they stopped coming at all, about the way I'd built walls so high I'd forgotten there was anything worth protecting behind them. Maybe we're both just people who got used to being alone, she wrote one night, curled against me on her couch. Maybe we don't have to be anymore, I wrote back. She smiled at that. The real smile, the one I'd only started seeing after the first few weeks, the one that made her whole face change. I should have known it couldn't last. Nothing that good ever does without a cost. It was a Tuesday when everything started to fall apart. I was finishing up a job in the suburbs, routine maintenance on a commercial unit, nothing complicated, when my phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Beer tonight? Haven't seen you in weeks. Starting to think you died. I stared at the message for a long moment. He was right. I hadn't seen him since the night before my first date with Ellie. Hadn't really thought about it, honestly. I'd been too wrapped up in her, in us, in the small miracle of finding someone who made the silence feel like music instead of emptiness. But Derek was still my best friend. Or at least, he had been. 15 years of history didn't just disappear because I'd gotten distracted. Sure, I typed back. Murphy's at 8? His response was immediate. Finally, thought I was going to have to file a missing persons report. I told Ellie I was meeting up with Derek, and she sent back a thumbs-up emoji followed by a string of beer mugs. Have fun. Tell him I said hi. Or write it, I guess. Something about that made me smile. The easy way she joked about it now, like her silence was just another quirk instead of the wall it had been with everyone else. Murphy's was a dive bar near downtown, the kind of place with sticky floors and a jukebox that only played songs from before we were born. Derek was already there when I arrived, hunched over a booth in the corner, 2 beers sweating on the table. There he is! He stood up and clapped me on the shoulder, grinning wide. The man who fell off the face of the earth. Sit. Tell me everything. I slid into the booth across from him, took a long pull of the beer he'd ordered, and felt the familiar ease of being around someone who'd known me since before I knew myself. Derek could be loud and pushy and exhausting, but he was also the person who'd shown up at my apartment after Kayla left with a 6-pack in a truly terrible comedy movie. He was the one who'd dragged me out of my shell when I would have happily stayed inside it forever. So? He leaned forward, elbows on the table. How's it going with Ellie? You two still talking? Yeah. I couldn't help the smile that crept onto my face. More than talking, actually. It's good, Derek. Really good. Good how? Like, you're happy good? Or like, you're getting laid good? Both, I guess. I searched for the words. She's different. I don't know how to explain it. Being with her feels easy, like I don't have to pretend to be someone else. Derek nodded, slowly, something flickering across his face that I couldn't quite read. That's great, man. Really, I'm happy for you. Thanks. I took another drink. Honestly, I should be thanking you for setting us up, even though you could have warned me, about the whole, I gestured vaguely, the not talking thing. Yeah. He shrugged, but something in his posture shifted, more guarded. Would you have gone if I'd told you? Probably not, I admitted. But that's not really the point. Sure it is. You needed a push. I gave you a push. He grinned, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. That's what friends are for, right? Something about the way he said it made me uneasy. A small prickle at the back of my neck, the kind you get when a system's not running quite right, but you can't figure out why. Speaking of which, Derek said, pulling out his phone, I should show you something. He slid the phone across the table, and I looked down at the screen. It was a group text, a bunch of names I vaguely recognized, guys from Derek's office, people I'd met once or twice at parties. The messages were from over a month ago, dated right around the time of my first date with Ellie. The first one was from Derek. Bets on. $200 says Marcus doesn't last a month with the mute girl. Someone else. No way. He'll bail after one date. Another. I give it 2 weeks, Max. He's too awkward for that. Derek again. That's the point. It'll be hilarious. I read it 3 times. 4. The words swam in front of my eyes, rearranging themselves into shapes that didn't make sense. A bet. The whole thing had been a bet. Marcus? Derek's voice seemed to come from very far away. Hey, man, I was just showing you because, you won, right? You lasted way more than a month. I owe Jimmy $200. It's kind of funny when you think about... Funny? My voice came out flat. Dangerous. A tone I didn't recognize as my own. You set me up with her as a joke. You used her as a punchline. Come on, it wasn't like that. Derek held up his hands, the grin fading. I was trying to help. You'd been moping around for months, wouldn't go anywhere, wouldn't meet anyone. I figured this would get you back out there, and it worked, didn't it? You're happy. She's happy. No harm done. No harm done. I repeated the words slowly, letting them sit in the air between us. Look, I knew you'd probably bail after one date anyway. He was talking faster now, defensive. Most guys would. It's not exactly normal, is it? Dating someone who can't even talk to you. I thought it'd be a funny story, something we'd laugh about later. I didn't think you'd actually... Actually what? I stood up. The movement was calm, deliberate. My hands weren't shaking, which surprised me. Actually like her? Actually care about her? Actually treat her like a human being instead of a punchline? Marcus, come on. You knew what this would mean to her. You had to know. I was thinking about her notebook now, about the careful handwriting, about the way she'd written, most people leave before the bread arrives, like it was just a fact of her life. You set her up to be humiliated. You set us both up. I was trying to help you. Derek's voice had an edge to it now. You've been a ghost for 2 years, man. Wouldn't talk to anyone, wouldn't go anywhere, just working home in that sad little apartment. So you made her part of a bet. Made me part of a bet. I reached for my jacket. 15 years, Derek. 15 years of friendship. And this is what you do. You're really going to throw all that away? Over her? I stopped at the edge of the booth, looked at him, really looked, and saw someone I didn't recognize, someone I wasn't sure I'd ever really known. I'm not throwing anything away, I said quietly. You already did. I walked out without looking back. The cold hit me like a slap, but I barely felt it. I made it to my truck, got inside, and sat there in the dark with my hands on the steering wheel, trying to breathe. A bet. It had all started as a bet. Every text, every date, every moment I'd thought was real. It was all built on a foundation of cruelty. Not mine, not Ellie's, but Derek's. And now I had to tell her. I had to tell her that the best thing in my life had started as someone else's cruel joke. The drive to her apartment felt like it took hours. Every red light, every stop sign, every second ticking by while I tried to figure out what I was going to say. How do you tell someone that their worst fears about people were right? How do you explain that the person who set you up did it for a laugh? I parked outside her building. The lights were on in her window. 3rd floor, corner unit, the one with the plants crowding the sill. She was up there right now, probably working on some design, maybe sketching, maybe thinking about me with no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone, stared at her name in my contacts. Ellie. I could just not tell her. The thought crept in, poisonous and tempting. She didn't need to know. Derek and his friends would never say anything. They'd look like idiots if they did. I could bury this, pretend I never saw those messages, and we could keep going like nothing had changed. But she would find out eventually. Secrets like this don't stay buried. And when she did find out, she'd know I'd kept it from her. She'd know I'd chosen to lie instead of trust her with the truth. I couldn't do that to her. Not after everything she'd told me. Not after she'd trusted me with her history, her pain, her hope. I got out of the truck. The walk to her door felt like walking to an execution, each step heavier than the last. I stood outside her apartment for a full minute before I knocked, trying to find words that didn't exist. She opened the door, smiling. She was wearing my hoodie, one I'd left at her place weeks ago, and her hair was piled on top of her head in a messy bun. She looked soft, happy, safe. She wasn't going to look like that much longer. "Hey," I said. My voice sounded wrong, hollow. "Can we talk?" Her smile flickered, just for a second. She stepped back to let me in. I sat on her couch, the same couch where she'd kissed me, where we'd passed notebooks back and forth, where she'd told me about the surgeries and the bullies and the boy who stood her up. Miso jumped onto my lap immediately, purring like he could sense something was wrong and wanted to help. Ellie sat across from me, notebook in hand, waiting. I couldn't look at her while I said it. So I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshot I'd taken of Derek's group text, and handed it to her. She read it. I watched her face change. The smile disappeared first, then the color, then something I couldn't name that lived behind her eyes. She didn't cry. She didn't react at all, really. Just went still. Completely, perfectly still. Like someone who'd been hit and was waiting for the pain to catch up. "I didn't know," I said. The words tumbled out, desperate, inadequate. "I swear to you, Ellie, I had no idea until tonight. He never told me. I never would have." She held up her hand. The same gesture from the restaurant, from the first night we met. The one that meant stop. I stopped. She picked up her notebook, stared at it for a long moment. Then slowly, deliberately, she closed it. Didn't write anything. Just closed it. "Ellie, please, let me explain." She shook her head, stood up, walked to the door and opened it. Not angry, not crying, just quiet. The same way she'd probably been quiet all those other times, all those other disappointments, all those other people who'd confirmed what she'd always believed about the world. I stood too. Miso yowled in protest at being disturbed. "I'm not like them," I said. "What we have is real. I don't care how it started." But she wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at the door, at the space between me and the hallway. At the exit she was offering me, the same way she'd offered it to everyone else. I walked through it. The door closed behind me, not slammed. That would have been easier. Just closed. Quietly. Finally. I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the silence on the other side. Then I went home. The drive was a blur. I don't remember the roads, the turns, the traffic lights that must have been there. I just remember arriving at the duplex, sitting in my truck in the dark, and staring at my phone. I typed a text. "I'm sorry. Please let me explain." Sent. Waited. Nothing. I tried again. "I know how this looks, but what we have is real. I'm not giving up on that." Nothing. Again. "Just tell me what you need. I'll do anything." Nothing. I called. It went straight to voicemail. An automated message because she couldn't record one herself. The robot voice asking me to leave a message after the beep felt like a cruel joke. Another reminder of everything she couldn't do. Everything the world had taken from her. I didn't leave a message. What would I say? The days that followed were the longest of my life. I went to work because I had to, because standing still felt like drowning. I fixed furnaces and replaced compressors and smiled at customers who didn't know that something inside me was breaking. At night, I sat in the duplex that suddenly felt too quiet again, too empty, too much like it had been before she filled it with notebooks and laughter and the hope I'd almost forgotten I was capable of. I texted her every day, once, twice, never more than that. I didn't want to harass her, didn't want to become one more person who couldn't take a hint. But I couldn't just disappear either. I couldn't let her believe that I'd given up, that she was right to expect nothing, that I was just like everyone else. A week passed, then two. The texts went unanswered. I drove by her apartment once, just once, and saw that her lights were on. She was in there, living her life, existing in the same city as me without any indication that I existed at all. I told Mrs. Patterson what happened. Not everything, just the broad strokes, the bet, the revelation, the door closing behind me. She was quiet for a long time, then said, "You told her the truth when you could have lied. That means something." "Does it?" "It means you're not the kind of person who builds on rotten foundations." She patted my hand, her fingers papery and warm. "Give her time. The good ones always come back when they're ready." I wanted to believe her. I tried to believe her, but every day the silence stretched longer, and every day I felt her slipping further away. 3 weeks after she closed that door, I went to see Derek. Not to reconcile, not to forgive, just to say the things I should have said that night at the bar, before I'd let myself get distracted by shock and pain. He opened his apartment door looking like he hadn't slept in days. Stubble on his chin, eyes bloodshot, wearing the same shirt I'd seen him in at Murphy's. For a second, he almost looked relieved to see me. "Marcus, hey, I've been trying to call." "I know." I didn't step inside. Didn't want to. I'm not here to fight. I just need to say something. He waited, shoulders tense. "You didn't just hurt her," I said. "You made me part of hurting her, whether you meant to or not. And I don't know if I can forgive either of us for that." "Marcus, come on. It was a stupid joke. I never thought—" "That's the problem." I cut him off. "You never thought. About her. About me. About what it would mean if either of us actually felt something." I took a breath. "We've been friends for 15 years, Derek. And right now, I look at you, and I don't know who I'm seeing." "So, that's it?" His voice cracked. "You're just going to throw away 15 years over some girl you've known for a month?" I looked at him for a long moment. Remembered. All the times he'd been there. The barbecues, the bad movies, the nights when I'd needed someone and he'd shown up without being asked. Then I remembered Ellie's face when she closed that notebook. "Yeah," I said. "I guess I am." I walked away. He didn't follow. The drive home was quiet. Not the empty quiet I'd gotten used to, but something heavier, sadder. The end of something that had been a part of my life for longer than I could remember. I got back to the duplex, parked in the driveway, and sat there in the dark. The porch light was still out. I still hadn't replaced it. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out the notebook, our notebook, the one we'd filled with conversations and jokes and confessions. I'd grabbed it from my apartment weeks ago, couldn't bear to leave it behind even though looking at it hurt. I opened it now, flipped through the pages, read her handwriting, neat and small and careful, each word a choice she'd made, each sentence a piece of herself she'd given me. Most people leave before the bread arrives. You're either very kind or very hungry. I just want to be a person someone chooses. You're the first one who didn't leave. I stopped on that one. Read it again. Felt the words settle into my chest like stones. She was wrong. I had left. Not because I wanted to, because she asked me to. But I still walked out that door. I still let her close it behind me. I still drove away and went home and sat in the silence like I didn't have a choice. But I did have a choice. I still had a choice. I closed the notebook, started the truck, and drove back to her apartment. It was late, past 11, The kind of hour when showing up unannounced is either romantic or terrifying depending on how the other person feels about you. But I couldn't wait anymore. Couldn't let another night pass without at least trying. The building was dark except for a few windows. Hers was one of them. I parked, got out, stood on the sidewalk, looking up at her light. The notebook was in my hands. I'd written something on the way over. Pulled to the side of the road, scribbled it down with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't know if it was the right thing to say. I didn't know if anything I said would matter. But I knew I had to try. I walked to the entrance, pressed the buzzer for her apartment. Waited. Nothing. I pressed it again. Still nothing. I was about to give up, about to accept that she'd seen my truck, seen me standing there and decided I wasn't worth answering, when the door clicked. I pushed it open, climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, walked down the hallway to her corner unit. The door was cracked open. She was standing just inside, wearing the same hoodie, my hoodie, her hair down, her face unreadable. Miso sat at her feet, tail flicking. I didn't say anything, just held up the notebook, our notebook, and offered it to her. She looked at it, at me, at the notebook again. Then she took it. She opened it to the page I'd written. I watched her read, watched her eyes move across my terrible handwriting, watched her face for any sign of what she was thinking. This is what I'd written. I didn't know how we met was a joke, but I should have wondered why Derek was so eager to help. I should have known him well enough to suspect. That's on me. I can't change how this started, but I can tell you that every moment after that first dinner was real. Every text, every walk, every time I stayed when I could have left. You wrote that I was the first one who didn't leave. I did leave, because you asked me to. But I'm back. Not because I expect you to forgive me, because I need you to know. I'm choosing you, not out of pity, not out of guilt, because you're the only person who's ever made my silence feel like home. She read it once, twice. I counted the seconds, each one stretching into forever. Then she looked up at me. Her eyes were wet, but not spilling over. Her jaw was tight. Her hands trembled slightly where they held the notebook. She picked up the pen that was clipped to the cover, turned to a fresh page, wrote a single line. Then she showed it to me. I was waiting for you to come back. Something cracked open in my chest. Something that had been sealed so long I'd forgotten it was there. She stepped aside. I walked in. The door closed behind me. Not like last time, not final, just closed. Private. Us. We stood in her living room, the notebook between us, neither of us sure what came next. Miso yowled from somewhere in the kitchen, annoyed at being ignored. The sound broke the tension, and we both laughed, mine out loud, hers silent and shaking, but real. Real. I'm sorry, I said. For all of it. For the bet. For Derek. For leaving even though you asked me to. She shook her head. Wrote, You told me the truth. You could have lied. I thought about it, I admitted, for about 30 seconds. But you didn't. No, I didn't. She set the notebook down on the coffee table, took a step closer. Close enough that I could see the dried tear tracks on her cheeks, the shadows under her eyes, the exhaustion of 3 weeks of silence. Start over, she wrote. I took the pen, thought about it. Then I wrote, No, keep going. She read it, looked up at me, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled. Not the careful smile from the restaurant, not the guarded, almost smile of someone expecting disappointment. A real smile. Tired, fragile, but real. She kissed me. Soft and slow, like she was relearning something she'd thought she'd lost. I kissed her back. That night, I stayed. Not because she asked. She didn't have to. I stayed because the silence finally felt like something I wanted, not something I was stuck with. We sat on her couch, Miso draped across our laps, passing the notebook back and forth even though we didn't need to. Just because we could. Just because the weight of it in my hands reminded me of every conversation we'd had, every word she'd trusted me with, every piece of herself she'd given me. I deleted Derek's number, I told her. She raised an eyebrow. Really? 15 years. I shrugged. But he made you part of a joke. There's no coming back from that. She was quiet for a moment. Then she wrote, I'm sorry you lost a friend. I'm not. I meant it. Some friendships aren't worth keeping if they're built on hurting someone else. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around her, pulled her close, felt the warmth of her against me in the quiet of her apartment. The notebook sat on the coffee table, pages full, cover worn soft from all the times it had passed between us. We didn't write anything else that night. We didn't need to. Some things don't require words. They just need someone willing to stay. The weeks after that were different. Not easier, exactly. We were both still healing, still learning to trust that this was real, but different, better, like we'd walked through fire and come out the other side, singed but alive. She met Mrs. Patterson officially. The three of us had dinner at my place, Miso sulking in the corner, while Mrs. Patterson told stories about her late husband, and Ellie sketched her portrait on a napkin. When she left, she pulled me aside and said, That's the one. Don't let her go. I didn't plan to. Ellie started leaving more things at my apartment. Not just toothbrushes and chargers anymore. Art supplies, sketchbooks, the special tea she liked. I cleared out a drawer for her, then a shelf, then half the closet, because her winter coat was too nice to leave crumpled in the truck. We talked about the future sometimes, carefully, the way you handle something fragile. She mentioned wanting to move to a bigger place eventually, somewhere with better light for her design work. I mentioned maybe, someday, making the duplex a real home instead of a place I just slept. Neither of us said the words out loud, but they were there, written in all the small things. One morning in December, I woke up to find her already awake, sitting at my kitchen table with her sketchbook. The winter light came through the window, pale and cold, catching the edges of her hair. What are you drawing? I asked, still half asleep. She held up the page. It was us. Her curled on the couch, me in the kitchen making coffee. Miso sprawled between us. The lines were quick, loose, a moment captured in ink. At the bottom she'd written, Home. I looked at her. She looked at me. And I knew, with the kind of certainty that comes from almost losing something, that this was real. That whatever we were building, with notebooks and silence and all the small moments in between, it was worth every broken thing that had come before. I love you, I said. I hadn't planned to say it, hadn't rehearsed it or thought it through. The words just came, the way words do when they've been waiting too long to stay inside. She set the sketchbook down, picked up her pen, wrote something. Then she showed it to me, her hands steady, her eyes bright. I love you too, even though you make terrible coffee. I laughed. She smiled. Miso yowled from the living room, demanding breakfast. And that was it. No fireworks, no dramatic declarations, no movie moment where the music swells. Just two people in a small kitchen in Richmond, Virginia, on an ordinary December morning, saying the things they meant. The silence around us wasn't empty anymore. It was full.